Imagine you're a retired football player. You used to be so great at football, and you left the game a legend. Every time you stepped onto the field, you left everything on that field. The game loves you, and you love the game. So every time you step onto the field, you make sure to put everything on the line. There are no boundaries to your play, and you don't care about any risk. You stomp around the field, running through anything that comes your way. Then, you get hit in the head. It all goes black, and you wake up dazed. You just had a concussion. You don't really care since you've been having those since you're 12, so you just get back on the field and be a great football player. See, now that's the problem. Too many kids and even adults get concussions and don't take proper care of their brains. When you get a concussion, you basically slap your brain into your skull. Everybody needs to know the dangers of CTE so you can not only help yourself but your friends and family. CTE is a big problem in sports as it lowers the lifespans and mental health being of our athletes. I know what CTE is because I've seen what it could do to a person, and I've played football, which is a sport that has a lot of CTE diagnoses. Also, I've watched a lot of movies on it, and I've researched the topic for a long time. For this informative speech, I'm first going to explain what CTE is. Secondly, I'm going to talk about how it develops in your brain. And lastly, I'm going to talk about a victim of CTE. CTE is a neurodegenerative disease caused by repeated head injuries. The symptoms don't occur after multiple injuries and after multiple years. And the symptoms of CTE are behavioral problems, mood problems, and trouble thinking. There is no cure for CTE, and it can only be diagnosed after an autopsy. An autopsy is an examination of a person after they have died to see what the cause of their death is. In this case, they have to remove the brain from the skull and look at it and see what's going on with it. In this picture, I will show what is happening in the brain. So this brain is a normal, healthy brain, and it's all blue. Blue in this picture is good, and this hole is just supposed to be there. In this brain is CTE, and there's a lot of green on the outside, there's a lot of holes inside, and there's a lot of red right here. If it's not blue, it's not good, and in this example, there is a lot of not blue. This is Alzheimer's, but that's not what we're talking about today. I got that picture from an article called Brain Imaging Tackling Chronic Traumatic Encephalopathy. I'm sorry, I can't really pronounce that word. But that article was written by Dr. Francis Collins. Now that I talked about what CTE is, I want to dive into how it develops in your brain. CTE develops into your brain after you've had multiple head injuries. These head injuries are known as concussions. The symptoms of concussions are headaches, ringing in the ears, nausea, vomiting, fatigue, and blurry vision, and also confusion, amnesia, and dizziness. The brain processes a little slower right after a concussion, so if you ask a person with a very recent concussion a question, he will be slow to respond. These symptoms usually occur right after concussion, but after a few days, you might experience concentration issues, irritability, sensitivity to light, trouble sleeping, and troubles with smelling and tasting. Also had a friend who also had a concussion, and he was unable to play for 3 months. He wore shades indoors around any lights for 3 months, and it was just a horrible experience for him. I got all of this info from mayoclinic.org. When someone gets hit in the head during a football game, they usually rush to a medical tent to be evaluated. The medical evaluations usually are right and can diagnose an athlete with a concussion, but on some occasions the athlete outsmarts the test, or the medical evaluator is corrupt and lets the athletes go back on the field. That is the problem. Athletes are continuing to play through brain injury, and if they continue to play this way, they will receive CTE, and it will make life extremely difficult for them after football. Now that I've discussed how you obtain CTE, I'm going to show you an example of a real person who has dealt with CTE. In 2007, a neuropathologist examined the brains of 111 NFL players. 110 of those players were shown to have CTE. Throughout this study, linemen were the most common cases, with over 44 brains having CTE. The next was running backs with 20, and the next was defensive backs with 17. There are a lot of different positions with CTE diagnosis, but these were the highest. One of my favorite players suffered from this disease, and he knew that there was something wrong with his brain. He was depressed and had suicidal thoughts daily. He wanted scientists to study his brain. His name was Junior Seau, and he was a linebacker. He wanted scientists to study his brain so badly so that when he committed suicide, he shot himself in the chest to preserve his brain. And then when the scientists studied his brain, they were shown with clear evidence that he did have CTE. I found this information on the LA Times in an article about his death. So overall, in this informative speech, I talked about what CTE is, I talked about how it develops, and I talked about one of the victims of CTE. This speech is all about how big of a problem CTE is in our sports and how it lowers the lifespan of our athletes. Overall, we need to figure out how to stop CTE from affecting our athletes.